Waitress saved a billionaire's son from a crash. What he did next shocked everyone. It all started with the sound of breaking glass and the scream of tires against asphalt, a sound that would change 2 lives forever. Under the golden glow of the morning sun, a young waitress named Sophie Marin ran toward a wrecked car at the edge of the street, her heart pounding, her apron still tied around her waist. She didn't stop to think, she just ran. Inside, a boy no older than 8 was crying for his father. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel because every story here proves that kindness still matters. By the time emergency sirens cut through the air, Sophie was already kneeling by the boy, speaking softly, reassuring him as she wiped the blood from his forehead with the corner of her sleeve. The driver, a man in a dark suit, was unconscious, pinned against the steering wheel. Smoke rose from the crushed hood, and the smell of fuel made her throat tighten. She reached through the broken glass, unbuckled the child, and pulled him to safety seconds before a small burst of flame erupted beneath the engine. Her arms were trembling as she held him, but her voice stayed steady. "You're safe now, I promise, you're safe." The boy clung to her, sobbing against her shoulder. Moments later, firefighters arrived, and paramedics rushed in. Sophie stepped back, breathless and shaking, her clothes stained with soot and blood. A police officer guided her away, but she kept glancing toward the child until she saw him being placed safely inside the ambulance. Only then did she let herself collapse to her knees on the cold pavement. She didn't know who they were, the father and son whose lives she'd just saved. She didn't know that within 24 hours, every news outlet in the city would know her name. Across town, in the top floor of a glass tower overlooking the skyline, Gabriel Darmont was signing documents in his private office when his phone rang. His assistant's voice trembled on the other end. "Sir, there's been an accident. It's your brother's car. He and your nephew were taken to St. Clair Hospital." Gabriel froze, pen still in hand. His world, built on numbers, mergers, and cold control, suddenly tilted out of balance. When he arrived at the hospital, the corridors smelled of antiseptic and fear. His brother Mathieu was stable but unconscious. His nephew Leo had minor injuries, nothing life-threatening, but the nurses kept mentioning one name. "The waitress," one of them said. "She saved the boy before the car caught fire. If she hadn't pulled him out..." Gabriel didn't finish the thought. He asked where she was, but by the time he got downstairs, she was gone. That evening, as he sat beside Leo's bed, the boy stirred awake. "Uncle Gabe?" "I'm here," Gabriel said, his usually firm voice softening. "The lady," Leo whispered. "She was brave. She stayed until the firemen came." Gabriel brushed the boy's hair back gently. "She's safe too. I'll find her, Leo, I promise." He didn't know why he said it. Maybe because gratitude wasn't something Gabriel Darmont gave easily, and yet, for the first time in years, he felt he owed someone something deeper than money. The next day, he sent his assistant to track her down. It wasn't difficult. The story had gone viral. Waitress risks her life to save billionaire's family. Cameras camped outside the cafe where she worked, chasing the face of an ordinary woman who had done something extraordinary. When Gabriel finally found her, she was wiping down tables inside Café Montrose, her head low to avoid attention. He stepped inside quietly, his tailored suit out of place among the aroma of coffee and clinking cups. "Sophie Marin," he said. She looked up, startled. "Yes?" "I'm Gabriel Darmont." Recognition flickered across her face. She'd seen his photo in the papers. "You're Leo's uncle?" He nodded. "And his guardian. My brother is recovering. He's alive because of you." Sophie shook her head. "He's alive because help came in time." "No," Gabriel said, his tone firm but calm. "He's alive because of you." There was something about the way he said it, not as a public statement, but as a private truth. "I didn't do it for gratitude," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. "That's why it matters." He set a small envelope on the counter. "This is for you." She frowned. "If that's money, I can't accept it." "It's not," he said. "It's my card. I'd like to invite you to dinner, to thank you properly." Sophie blinked. "Dinner?" He smiled faintly. "Unless you prefer another hospital visit." Her laugh was soft, unexpected. "I'm just a waitress, Mr. Darmont. I don't belong in your world." "Neither do most of the people in it," he said. "That's why I'd rather have dinner with someone real." She hesitated, torn between disbelief and curiosity. "I'll think about it. That's all I ask." When he left, the cafe fell silent again, but the moment lingered like a whisper she couldn't shake. That night, Sophie walked home under the city lights, her mind replaying his voice. She'd seen men like him before, powerful, distant, untouchable, but something in his eyes had unsettled her. It wasn't arrogance. It was loneliness. Meanwhile, in his penthouse overlooking the river, Gabriel poured himself a drink he didn't taste. His mind wasn't on business or profits, or even his brother's recovery. It was on the woman who had run into flames without hesitation. He'd spent years mastering control of markets, of people, of his own emotions. But this was something he couldn't quantify, a debt that couldn't be repaid. He told himself it was gratitude, respect, nothing more. But deep down, something in him already knew that the moment she'd pulled his nephew from that wreckage, Sophie Marin had done more than save a child. She had cracked open a heart that had long forgotten how to feel. And as he stared at the city below, Gabriel realized with a quiet dread and wonder that he wasn't just grateful. He was intrigued, and he couldn't stop thinking about her. Gabriel told himself he wasn't chasing her, that this was simply gratitude, nothing else. But gratitude doesn't make a man check his watch every hour or find excuses to pass by a small cafe that had suddenly become the center of his thoughts. 3 days after their brief meeting, he returned to Café Montrose. It was early morning, the air thick with the smell of coffee and fresh croissants. Sophie was there, hair tied back, sleeves rolled up, smiling faintly as she carried plates to a table of regulars. She looked different in daylight, calmer, more grounded than anyone Gabriel knew. Her world was small but rich with authenticity, the kind he had long forgotten existed. When she saw him standing near the door, surprise flickered across her face. "Mr. Darmont," she said, trying to sound casual. "You're back." "I was nearby," he lied. "I thought I'd try your coffee." She arched an eyebrow. "Our coffee is for people who don't own private jets, sir." He smiled, the corner of his mouth curving slightly. "Then I suppose I'm long overdue to try it." Sophie sighed but couldn't suppress a grin. "Fine, but if you're hoping to find the perfect espresso, I can't promise miracles. I've had enough of those lately," he said quietly. She froze, understanding the meaning behind his words. The accident, the boy, the life that could have ended. "How is your nephew?" "He's recovering well. Still asks about the woman who saved him." "That's good," she said softly. "He's a brave kid." "So are you." Sophie shrugged. "I just did what anyone would have done." Gabriel looked at her for a moment. No, most people would have stood back and filmed it. Her eyes met his, steady, unguarded, and for a brief second, neither spoke. The tension between their worlds, their differences, hung in the air like an invisible thread neither wanted to cut. He finally broke the silence. "About that dinner, does the offer still scare you?" "I didn't say it scared me," she said, placing a steaming cup in front of him. "Then what's stopping you?" She hesitated. "Because I know what people will say. The rich man and the waitress, it sounds like a bad headline waiting to happen." Gabriel's tone softened. "What if we stop worrying about what they say?" She smiled faintly. "Easy for you to say. People already listen to you." He studied her, impressed by her quiet confidence. "All right," he said. "No fancy restaurant, just dinner, 2 people, no headlines." Sophie tilted her head. "Where?" "Wherever you feel comfortable." She laughed. "That's dangerous. You might end up in a diner that serves fries in paper baskets." "I'll risk it," he said. She hesitated again, but something in his sincerity disarmed her. "Okay, 1 dinner, that's it." He smiled. A real smile this time, not the practiced one he wore in boardrooms. "Friday?" "Friday," she agreed. When he left, Sophie leaned against the counter, her pulse unsteady. Her co-workers teased her the rest of the morning, but beneath her laughter she felt a quiet unease. People like Gabriel Darmont didn't just see people like her. They passed through their lives like shadows, admired from a distance, unreachable, and yet somehow he'd reached out. Friday came too quickly. She spent half the afternoon convincing herself she wasn't nervous. She wore a simple blue dress, nothing expensive, just something that made her feel like herself. When Gabriel arrived at the diner she'd chosen, he was exactly as she remembered, tall, composed, his presence commanding even in the humblest of places. But there was something softer in his eyes tonight, something uncertain. "You're early," she said. "So are you," he replied. They sat in a booth by the window. The diner buzzed quietly with the sound of plates and laughter. For once, Gabriel seemed almost relaxed. "I can't remember the last time I sat somewhere without reservations made weeks in advance," he said, glancing at the menu. "Careful," Sophie teased. "You might actually enjoy being ordinary." He smiled. "Maybe that's exactly what I need." As the night went on, conversation flowed easily. She told him about her late father, who had been a mechanic. He told her about his mother, who had taught him to love music before he traded art for finance. When the check arrived, Sophie reached for it automatically. "I invited you, remember?" He chuckled. "You think I'd let you pay? I don't like being a charity case, Mr. Darmont." "You're not," he said, voice steady. "You're the only person I've met in years who makes me forget who I'm supposed to be." The honesty in his tone left her momentarily speechless. She looked down at her hands, unsure how to respond. "Gabriel," she said finally, "if you're looking for something easy, I'm not that. My life isn't elegant or simple." He leaned forward. "Maybe that's what I've been missing." Their eyes met again, and something unspoken passed between them. Not romance yet, but recognition. When he drove her home that night, neither wanted to say goodbye. She stood at her door, the city lights painting her face in gold and shadow. "You know this can't be normal," she said softly. "Normal's overrated," he said. Sophie laughed quietly. "Then what is this?" "I don't know," Gabriel admitted. "But I don't want it to end." She opened her door slowly, smiling in spite of herself. "Good night, Gabriel." "Good night, Sophie." He waited until her light came on before walking back to his car. That night, neither of them slept well. She kept replaying his voice, his sincerity. And he, the man who controlled everything, found himself thinking about a woman who lived without needing control at all. But what neither of them knew was that their connection had already stirred something beyond their understanding, something that would soon test everything they thought they knew about love, class, and redemption, because someone else had seen them together, and that someone wasn't planning to stay silent. The following Monday began like any other, or so Sophie thought. The cafe was busier than usual, sunlight pouring through the windows as she served coffee and croissants to the morning crowd. Her co-workers whispered more than they worked, though she didn't notice at first. It wasn't until she passed the newspaper stand outside during her break that she saw it. A photograph, grainy but unmistakable. Gabriel Darmont, billionaire banking heir, spotted at late-night diner with mystery waitress. Her heart sank. There she was, frozen mid-laugh, sitting across from him in that corner booth. She hadn't even realized there had been cameras that night. The rest of the day passed in a haze of whispers and curious glances. Customers pointed. Her manager kept frowning, clearly anxious about the unwanted attention. When Gabriel's car pulled up outside later that afternoon, it didn't calm her. It made everything worse. He walked in wearing the same controlled expression that made businessmen both respect and fear him. But Sophie could see the tension behind it, a man trying to manage something that couldn't be managed. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. She nodded, wiping her hands on her apron before following him outside. "I didn't expect this," he said, gesturing toward the newspaper in her hand. "Neither did I," she replied, her voice low. "How did they even find out?" He shook his head. "I don't know." "I didn't tell anyone." "Then someone did," she exhaled sharply. "You have people watching you, Gabriel. You must know what it looks like. The rich man and the waitress. Everyone's already decided what this is." "I don't care what they think," he said. "Well, I do," she whispered, "because I'm the one they'll tear apart." He took a step closer, his voice soft but firm. "You didn't do anything wrong. You saved my family, Sophie. You don't deserve this." She looked up at him, eyes filled with anger and hurt. "You think that matters? To them, I'm just another story, and when the headlines fade, I'm still the one left behind." He hesitated, his usual confidence faltering. "Then let me fix this." "How?" "I'll talk to the press. I'll make a statement." "Don't," she interrupted. "That'll only make it worse." "Sophie." "No," she said, her voice trembling now. "You don't understand. I can't live under a microscope. I have my mother to take care of, my job, my peace. I can't have people following me because I had dinner with you." Her honesty hit him harder than he expected. "I never meant to hurt you." "I know," she said softly, "but you still might." For a moment, silence filled the space between them. Cars passed. The wind rustled through the awning above. Then she added quietly, "Maybe this is where we stop pretending our worlds can overlap." He wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, that she belonged anywhere she wanted to, but something in her expression stopped him. Instead, he said, "I'll make sure the story dies down." She nodded faintly. "Do that, and thank you for understanding." She turned to go, but before she stepped back inside, she said one last thing. "Whatever this was, Gabriel, it was real. That's why I can't let it get ruined." And then she was gone. For the rest of the evening, Gabriel sat in his car outside the cafe, staring through the glass. She laughed with customers again, the same calm composure she always had, but something in her eyes had changed. He knew what it was. distance. Over the next few days, he used every connection he had to shut down the gossip. Articles disappeared, images were scrubbed, but the damage was already done, and yet, even after all of that, he couldn't stay away. On the 5th night, he showed up at the cafe again. She didn't expect him, didn't even look up until he was standing at the counter. "Coffee?" she asked, voice polite, distant. "I came to say thank you," he said. "You were right. I needed to step back." She folded her arms. "You didn't have to come here for that. I wanted to," he said simply. "Leo's been asking to see you." Her face softened. "How is he?" "Recovering fast. He told me he made a drawing for you." Sophie smiled. "He's sweet." "He is," Gabriel said. "He also doesn't understand why you haven't visited." Her chest tightened. "Because it's not that simple." "Maybe it is," he said quietly. Before she could answer, the cafe door opened and a woman walked in, tall, elegant, and perfectly put together. She was the kind of woman who looked like she belonged in Gabriel's world. "Gabriel," she said sharply. "So it's true. You've been hiding her here." Sophie blinked. "Who?" He sighed. "Sophie, this is Isabel." "My ex-fiancée." "Ex?" Isabel scoffed. "Only because you ended it when you decided to play savior with your waitress." "Isabel," Gabriel warned, his voice low. She ignored him. "Do you have any idea how ridiculous this looks? You, the heir to one of the largest investment firms in France, falling for some—" "Stop," he said, stepping forward. "Don't you dare finish that sentence." But Sophie's voice was calm. "It's fine." "No, it's not," Gabriel said. "You don't get to insult her." Isabel crossed her arms, cold and furious. "I don't need to. You've already ruined yourself enough for her." She turned on her heel and stormed out, leaving silence behind her. Sophie stood frozen for a moment, then quietly said, "You didn't tell me about her." "There was nothing to tell," he said. "It ended long before I met you." "Doesn't feel like it," she whispered. Gabriel exhaled. "Sophie," she shook her head. "You should go." He hesitated, wanting to fight, to make her see that Isabel's words meant nothing. But the look in her eyes, that mix of pain and disbelief, told him that anything he said now would only make it worse. He turned to leave, and as the door closed behind him, Sophie leaned against the counter, her heart breaking quietly in the dim light of the cafe, because she finally realized something she'd been trying to ignore. She hadn't just saved his nephew. She'd let herself fall for a man who didn't belong to her world, and maybe never could. For 2 weeks, Sophie didn't see him. The cafe felt emptier, though she'd never admit it out loud. She told herself it was for the best, that men like Gabriel Darmon didn't belong in her life, no matter how kind his eyes looked when he forgot the weight of his name. But every night, when she walked home under the same streetlights where their story began, she thought about him, about the way he'd defended her without hesitation, the way his voice softened only when he said her name. Gabriel, meanwhile, buried himself in work, meetings, reports, boardrooms, the perfect armor for a man trying to forget someone real. But even in his world of glass towers and contracts, her voice followed him. His brother Mathieu noticed first. "You've been staring at the same page for 10 minutes, he said one afternoon from his hospital bed. Gabriel looked up, startled. "Just distracted." "By the waitress?" Gabriel didn't answer, but the silence was loud enough. Mathieu smiled weakly. "She saved Leo, you know. Maybe she's saving you too." Gabriel frowned. "Don't romanticize it. She wants nothing to do with me." "Maybe because you keep acting like you're two different species," Mathieu said. "Try being human for once, not a Darmont." It was the first time anyone had said that to him, and it stuck. That evening, after tucking Leo into bed, Gabriel found the drawing the boy had made for Sophie, a simple crayon sketch of the accident scene, with stick figures holding hands under a big yellow sun. On the corner, Leo had written, "For Sophie, my hero." He stared at it for a long time. The next morning, he went to the cafe again. Not as the billionaire this time, but as a man trying to fix something fragile. When Sophie saw him walk in, her chest tightened. She hadn't expected him, but she also hadn't stopped waiting. "Coffee?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Only if it comes with a chance to apologize," he said. She looked at him, and for the first time he wasn't wearing his armor. His suit was still perfect, but his eyes were tired, sincere. "You don't owe me an apology," she said. "I do," he replied. "For not protecting you sooner, for letting my world spill into yours." Sophie hesitated. "You can't control what people say." "No," he admitted, "but I can control what I stand for. And I should have stood for you." Her breath caught. "I know what Isabel said," he continued. "And she was wrong. You didn't ruin anything. You reminded me what it means to care about something real. Sophie's voice softened. Gabriel, you don't have to do this. I know, he said, but I want to. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper, Leo's drawing. He wanted you to have this. She unfolded it, smiling as her eyes filled with tears. He remembered everything. He remembers you, Gabriel said quietly. Their eyes met, the distance between them shrinking again, drawn by something neither could deny. But just as she was about to speak, the cafe door swung open. Her manager, flushed and nervous, hurried over. Sophie, can we talk in private? She frowned. Now? Yes. It's urgent. Gabriel stepped back as she followed her boss into the back office. A few minutes later, she returned pale, her apron already untied. What happened? He asked. Her voice trembled. They're letting me go. What? Why? Apparently, the cafe's getting too much attention. They said the press showing up again was bad for business. Gabriel's expression darkened. Who told them to do that? I don't know, but it doesn't matter. It's done. He clenched his jaw. This is because of me. Please don't, she said quickly. I'll find another job, I always do. This isn't right. It's life, Gabriel, she said, forcing a sad smile. Not everyone gets to rewrite the rules. He looked at her, really looked, and realized that she was stronger than he'd ever been, even without money or power. I can help, he said. I can make a few calls. No, she interrupted. If you fix this, I'll owe you, and I don't want that between us. He exhaled slowly. Then what do you want? She hesitated. I want to breathe again. I want peace, and right now I can't have that near you. Her words hit him like a blade. He nodded slowly, understanding even though it tore him apart. If that's what you need, it is, she whispered. He took a step back, his voice breaking just slightly. Then I'll disappear, if that's what it takes to give you peace. She closed her eyes, fighting tears. Goodbye, Gabriel. He left without another word. That night, Sophie sat alone in her small apartment, staring at Leo's drawing. She wanted to hate him for bringing chaos into her life, but all she felt was a hollow ache, the kind that only comes from losing something that felt right in the wrong world. Meanwhile, in his penthouse, Gabriel stood by the window watching the city lights blur through the rain. For the first time in years, he didn't feel powerful or composed. He felt empty. He reached for his phone, typing her name, and then stopped. He couldn't force what needed to heal on its own, so he turned the phone face down, closed his eyes, and whispered to the silence, I'll wait. And somewhere across the city, Sophie whispered to herself, I wish he wouldn't. Neither of them knew it yet, but fate wasn't done with them, because one phone call, one that would come before dawn, was about to change everything again. The phone rang at 5:43 a.m. Sophie had been awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, her mind restless. She almost didn't answer, assuming it was a wrong number, but something made her pick up. Miss Moreau? The voice on the line was female, calm but urgent. This is St. Vincent Hospital. Are you acquainted with a Mr. Gabriel Darmont? Her blood ran cold. Yes, she said quickly, sitting up. What happened? There's been an accident. He's stable for now, but we need someone to authorize certain treatments. His family hasn't arrived yet. She was already out of bed before the woman finished speaking. I'll be there in 15 minutes. She didn't even change out of her old coat. Rain poured down as she ran through the streets, her breath catching from both fear and disbelief. It felt cruel that the man she'd pushed away was now fighting for his life. When she reached the hospital, everything smelled of antiseptic and heartbreak. Nurses rushed past her as she hurried to the front desk. Gabriel Darmont, she said breathlessly. Where is he? The nurse pointed to the elevators. ICU, 3rd floor. Her shoes squeaked on the polished floor as she ran. When she reached the hallway, she froze at the sight before her. Behind the glass window, Gabriel lay unconscious, pale, motionless, hooked to wires and machines that beeped softly in the sterile quiet. His face was bruised, his hand bandaged. Sophie's throat tightened. The doctor approached gently. Are you family? No, she whispered. Just someone who cares. He nodded, recognizing the weight behind her words. He was in a collision on the East Bridge, lost control in the rain. He's lucky to be alive. She stepped closer to the glass, her fingertips brushing it lightly as if it could close the distance between them. Will he wake up? He's strong, the doctor said, but he'll need time and someone to remind him why he should. She spent the next few hours by his bedside, the world shrinking to the rhythm of his breathing. She thought of the last words she'd said to him, Goodbye, Gabriel. And now, here he was, trapped between worlds, unable to hear her, unable to answer. She reached for his hand gently. "You told me you'd disappear," she whispered. "You didn't have to take that literally." Her eyes filled with tears. "You still owe me a coffee, remember? And Leo still wants to show me that drawing he made. So you'd better wake up, Gabriel. Do you hear me?" But there was no response, and only the hum of the machines and the rain against the windows. Hours passed before the door opened quietly. A woman stepped in, elegant, older, wearing a black coat and a look that combined exhaustion and grace. Sophie stood immediately. "Mrs. Darmont?" The woman nodded faintly. "You must be Sophie." Sophie's heart skipped. "He told you about me." "He didn't have to," Mrs. Darmont said softly. "I could tell from the way he spoke lately." His voice changed, softer, almost human again. Sophie blinked back tears. "He's strong. He'll pull through." The older woman moved closer to her son's bedside, her hand trembling slightly as she brushed his hair back. "He works himself to death, you know. I always worried the world would take everything good from him. I never imagined someone like you would bring it back." Sophie looked down, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't bring anything back, I just cared." "Sometimes that's enough," Mrs. Darmont said gently. They sat in silence for a while, two women from different worlds, bound by their love for the same man. When the nurse came to adjust the IV, Mrs. Darmont stood. "I'll need to call his brother and the board. They'll want updates." She turned to Sophie. "Will you stay with him?" Sophie hesitated only for a second. "Yes, as long as I can." After she left, Sophie leaned forward again, holding Gabriel's hand. She thought about every conversation, every look they'd shared, every wall he'd tried to keep up. "You know," she said softly, "I once told you I wanted peace, but maybe peace isn't what we find alone. Maybe it's what we build with the people who scare us, the ones who make us feel alive again." Her voice cracked. "So please, Gabriel, come back. I'm not ready to let you go." Her head rested gently on his arm, exhaustion finally winning over fear. She didn't notice the faint movement of his fingers until the nurse gasped. "Miss Moreau, look!" Sophie lifted her head. His hand had twitched. His eyelids fluttered. The beeping on the monitor quickened. She stood frozen, her breath caught between disbelief and hope. And then, faint but real, his lips parted. "Sophie?" Her knees almost gave out. She grabbed his hand tighter, tears falling freely now. "I'm here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm right here." His eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then finding hers, like a man surfacing from darkness into light. "You came," he murmured, weak but smiling. "Of course I came," she said, laughing through her tears. "You think I'd let you leave without paying that coffee debt?" He tried to laugh, but the sound came out as a broken breath. "You always win the argument." She pressed his hand to her cheek. "Not this one." "You win, Gabriel, you came back." His eyelids grew heavy again, but he kept looking at her, as if memorizing her face. "Don't leave," he whispered. "I won't," she said. "Not this time." He drifted back into sleep, but his breathing was stronger now, steadier. The color began to return to his face. Sophie stayed beside him, still holding his hand, knowing that whatever happened next, this moment had already changed everything, because now she understood what love beyond money really meant. And outside, as the rain slowed and the city began to wake, a quiet light broke through the clouds, like a promise neither of them had spoken yet, but both already felt. What Sophie didn't know was that this miracle of timing, her answering that phone, arriving when she did, was about to pull her deeper into his world than she ever imagined, and not everyone waiting there would be glad to see her. By the time Gabriel was discharged from the hospital, a week had passed. The story of his accident had made headlines everywhere, but what the public didn't know was that a waitress had sat by his side every day, refusing to leave even when security tried to escort her out. When he finally regained his strength, the first thing he did was ask for her. Sophie walked into his private room quietly, carrying a cup of coffee. He looked tired but alive, a little thinner, his arm still in a sling, but his eyes softer than she'd ever seen them. "I told you I'd bring your coffee debt to your bedside if I had to," she said with a small smile. Gabriel's lips curved faintly. "And you did. You're impossible to get rid of." "Good," she replied, setting the cup on his tray. "Maybe that means you'll stay out of trouble this time." He studied her face, the warmth behind her teasing. "You stayed," he said softly. "I promised I wouldn't leave," she replied, "and I don't break promises." There was a quiet pause, a kind of silence that meant more than words. He finally said, I don't deserve that kind of loyalty. Maybe not, she said, but you earned it anyway. Just then, the door opened. Mrs. Darmont entered, her posture graceful as ever, though her expression had changed, no longer guarded but almost affectionate. "Ah," she said, "the woman who can keep my son alive and humble. I'm in your debt." Sophie stood quickly. "You owe me nothing, Mrs. Darmont. I'm just glad he's all right." The older woman smiled knowingly. "I think you're glad for more reasons than that." Gabriel frowned. "Mother." But Mrs. Darmont waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, please, Gabriel. Do you think I don't see it? You've built empires out of logic and distance, but this woman has done what no business partner or therapist could. She made you human again." Sophie blushed, unsure how to respond. "I really should go." "Stay," Mrs. Darmont said gently. "He'll recover faster if you're here." After she left, Gabriel leaned back against the pillows. "You'll have to forgive her. Subtlety was never her strong suit." Sophie smiled faintly. "She's not wrong, though. You are different." He raised an eyebrow. "Different how? Less stone, more heart." He laughed quietly, a sound she hadn't heard in so long that it startled them both. "You know," he said, "I spent most of my life trying to control everything, every risk, every emotion, every detail. And then you walked into my life and turned all of it upside down." "Sorry," she said softly. "Don't be," he replied. "It was the best thing that ever happened to me." Before she could answer, the door opened again, this time with a sharp click of heels. "Isabel." Sophie froze. Gabriel's expression changed instantly, from warmth to steel. "You shouldn't be here." Isabel ignored him. "You nearly die, and you think I wouldn't come? I didn't ask you to." She turned to Sophie, her voice dripping with poison. "Of course, she's still here. You must have enjoyed the headlines, Miss Moreau, the tragic waitress who saved the billionaire." Sophie stood quietly, her hands clenched at her sides. "I didn't ask for attention. No, you just seem to find it wherever he goes." Gabriel's voice darkened. "Enough, Isabel." She laughed bitterly. "You think this will last? When the novelty fades, she'll remember who you are. And you'll remember who she's not." "That's enough," Gabriel repeated, louder now. Isabel's expression faltered, but her pride wouldn't let her stop. "The board already thinks you've lost control, Gabriel. You're supposed to lead Darmont Holdings, not throw it away for—" "Out," he said sharply, his tone colder than ice. "Get out." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Isabel's mask cracked, revealing hurt beneath the arrogance. "You'll regret this," she whispered. "You always do when you choose emotion over logic." She left without another word. Silence filled the room, heavy and trembling. Sophie stared at the floor. "She's right, you know, about the board, about how this looks." "I don't care how it looks," he said. "I care about what's real. But what's real might destroy you." He reached for her hand, his grip gentle but firm. "Then let it. I've lived half my life behind walls. I don't want to die behind them too." Her breath caught, but she didn't pull away. The doctor entered just then, breaking the moment. "Mr. Darmont, your discharge papers are ready." Sophie took a step back. "You'll need rest and quiet. I'll let you get settled." He looked at her, a flicker of panic in his eyes. "You'll come by again?" She smiled faintly. "Only if you promise not to crash any more cars." "I'll try," he said. When she left, he watched her through the window, the city sunlight cutting across her hair as she disappeared down the hall. Later that evening, after his driver brought him home, Gabriel stood by his penthouse window, still replaying her voice in his head. He thought he was ready to face his world again, the board meetings, the scrutiny, the business empire waiting for his command. But as the night deepened, his phone buzzed with a message that froze his blood. From Isabel. "You may not care about the board, but they care about you. Tomorrow morning, Darmont Holdings will vote to remove you as CEO. I warned you. Goodbye, Gabriel." He sat there for a long moment, staring out at the skyline, and for the first time in his life, he didn't think about power or money or loss. He thought about Sophie, and how she had saved him once from death, but now, somehow, she was the only one who could save him from himself. The next morning, the boardroom of Darmont Holdings buzzed with tension. The city skyline stretched across the floor-to-ceiling windows, but inside, the air was cold and heavy. Men in tailored suits murmured to one another, their voices sharp with judgment. At the head of the table sat Gabriel, bruised, still pale but calm. He looked nothing like the ruthless businessman they were used to. There was a quiet defiance in his eyes, a steadiness that unnerved even his closest allies. "Gabriel," said Henri Morel, the senior board member, "this vote isn't personal. It's about the future of this company. You've made questionable decisions. You mean being human? Gabriel replied evenly. A few men exchanged uncomfortable glances. You've been reckless, Henri continued. The press is watching our every move. Investors are nervous. And your relationship with... Her name is Sophie, Gabriel interrupted. And she has nothing to do with this. Henri leaned forward. She's everything to do with this. Your choices reflect on all of us. Do you really believe you can run a multi-billion-dollar enterprise while being distracted by some waitress? Gabriel's jaw tightened. That waitress saved my nephew's life, and mine. She has more integrity in one breath than half the people in this room. A murmur rippled through the table. Henri's face reddened. Watch your tone. I've been watching my tone for years, Gabriel said. I've played your game, spoken your language, built the empire you wanted, but I'm done pretending that profit makes us honorable. Is this a confession then? Henri asked. That you've lost control? Gabriel stood. His voice was calm, but the steel beneath it was unmistakable. No, this is a declaration. You can take the title, the office, the company, but you'll never take the one thing I finally found worth fighting for. Before Henri could reply, the doors opened. Every head turned. Sophie. She stood in the doorway, uncertain but determined, holding a small folder in her hands. She looked wildly out of place among the suits and marble, yet somehow she commanded the room. Miss Moreau, Henri said coldly. This is a private meeting. I know, she said quietly, but Gabriel doesn't deserve what you're doing. Gabriel's eyes widened. Sophie, what are you? She walked to the center of the room, her voice trembling but clear. You call him reckless, but what has he done? He saved lives, supported families, donated millions, and for once he did something not for business but for love. Henri scoffed. Love doesn't run corporations. No, she said, her eyes burning, but it reminds you why they exist. To serve people, not destroy them. Her words silenced the room. Even the board members who had come ready to vote against Gabriel hesitated. Sophie opened the folder and placed a stack of papers on the table. These are testimonials from employees, janitors, assistants, clerks, people whose lives your company changed because of him. They don't see him as a headline. They see him as someone who still remembers what humanity looks like. Henri's hand trembled slightly. How did you even get these? She smiled faintly. You'd be surprised what people will do for someone they respect. Gabriel stared at her, the woman who had once said she wanted peace, now standing in front of a firing squad for him. When she finished, the room was quiet. Henri finally cleared his throat. You've made your point, but this isn't a fairy tale. The board will proceed with the vote. Gabriel spoke before she could. No, let them vote. She turned to him, whispering urgently. Gabriel, it's all right, he said softly. Whatever happens, thank you. One by one, the members cast their votes. The sound of each paper hitting the table was like the tolling of a bell. When Henri collected them, his face was unreadable. By a margin of 1, he said slowly. The motion to remove Gabriel Darmont as CEO fails. A murmur of disbelief spread through the room. Gabriel exhaled, relief flooding his face. Henri frowned. Seems some of our members prefer a leader with a heart. You'll remain CEO, for now. The meeting dissolved in uneasy chatter. When the last member left, Gabriel turned to Sophie, still stunned. You came, he said quietly. She smiled, tears shining in her eyes. You didn't really think I'd let them destroy you, did you? He stepped closer, his voice low. I thought I'd already lost you. You almost did, she said, but then I remembered what you told me in the hospital, that you were tired of living behind walls. He searched her eyes. And you decided to break them down. She laughed softly. Someone had to. He took her hand, hesitant at first, as if afraid she'd pull away, but she didn't. I don't deserve you, he said. Maybe not, she replied, but you've earned me. Before either could say more, the elevator doors opened. Mrs. Darmont stepped out, elegant as ever, a knowing smile on her face. Well, she said, it seems I arrived just in time to witness the rebirth of a Darmont and the beginning of something far better. Sophie blushed. Mrs. Darmont? The older woman shook her head gently. No need for formalities, dear. You've done what I couldn't. Reminded my son that wealth without love is just a prison with better furniture. Gabriel chuckled under his breath. You're enjoying this far too much. Of course, his mother said. I always did love a good love story, especially one that humbles the rich. For the first time, Sophie laughed freely. The tension broke, replaced by something lighter, a fragile joy that felt like the start of healing. As they walked out of the boardroom together, Gabriel stopped and turned to her. You know this doesn't mean it'll be easy. I know, she said, but I also know that easy things aren't worth it. He smiled. Then we're in trouble. Good, she said. That means it's real. They stepped into the elevator, side by side as the doors closed, leaving behind the cold machinery of wealth and stepping into something entirely different. But neither of them knew that Isabel wasn't done yet, and the storm she was about to unleash would test everything they had just fought for. The storm arrived sooner than anyone expected. It started as a whisper, a rumor spreading through financial circles that Darmont Holdings had falsified a major report years earlier. Within days it became a headline. Within hours it was an investigation, and at the center of it all stood Gabriel. Anonymous sources claimed that during his tenure as CEO, he had hidden financial losses to protect the company's image. The evidence looked convincing: forged documents, manipulated figures, an email trail that pointed directly to his name. He knew immediately who was behind it: Isabel. She had been on the inside long enough to know how to wound him, not with money but with reputation. And in the world he came from, reputation was everything. The morning the story broke, Sophie found him standing on his balcony, the city stretching below like a battlefield. He hadn't slept. "They're calling for a criminal audit," he said flatly. "They think I embezzled millions." She moved closer. "Gabriel, you didn't?" "Of course I didn't. But Isabel's smart. She used old files, copied my digital signature. It'll take weeks to prove they're fake." Sophie reached for his arm. "Then we'll fight it." He turned to her sharply. "There's no we, Sophie. You've already lost too much because of me." She didn't flinch. "You don't get to decide that for me." His voice softened, breaking under the weight of exhaustion. "I can't drag you into this storm. It's uglier than you think." "I've seen ugly," she said. "I grew up with it. What I haven't seen is someone willing to fight for what's right, no matter how much it costs. Until now." He looked at her then, really looked, and something in his chest cracked. "Why do you do this?" he whispered. "Why do you believe in me?" "Because you've already paid for your mistakes," she said, "and because I've seen the man you really are." He closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength from her voice. Downstairs, the doorbell rang. When he opened it, a uniformed officer stood there holding an envelope. "Mr. Darmont, this is a formal summons. You're required to appear before the ethics tribunal on Friday." Gabriel took it silently. When the door closed, Sophie stepped forward. "We'll find proof, Gabriel, something that clears you." He shook his head. "Isabel covered her tracks too well. I'd need access to private archives, and they're locked behind board clearance." Sophie frowned. "Then we find another way." He gave a tired smile. "You sound like Leo. Maybe he's rubbing off on me." For the next 2 days they barely slept. Sophie sat by his desk, sorting through hundreds of old documents, financial ledgers, and encrypted emails. Her analytical mind, the same one that helped her balance bills on a waitress's wage, now dissected billion-dollar reports with quiet precision. "Look at this," she said one night, circling a name on a spreadsheet. "This account, GM Holdings. It appears in every falsified transaction." Gabriel leaned closer. "That's not one of ours." "Exactly. Isabel must have created it as a ghost company." He stared at the document, realization dawning. "She used my initials. GM, Gabriel Mathieu. She wanted it to look personal." Sophie smirked faintly. "Then let's make it personal." They traced the fake company through offshore records, finding a pattern that led to a private bank in Monaco. Sophie's hands shook as she found the key, a payment authorization under Isabel's name. "Got you," she whispered. Gabriel looked at her with something between awe and disbelief. "You just did what an entire audit team couldn't." She shrugged. "Guess waitressing teaches you to notice details." He smiled, the first real one in days. "You're extraordinary." But before they could celebrate, the lights flickered. A knock echoed through the apartment. 2 men in dark suits stood at the door. "Mr. Darmont," one said, flashing a badge, "we need to confiscate all relevant files for the ongoing investigation. Effective immediately." Sophie's heart stopped. "You can't. We're in the middle of—" "It's procedure, ma'am." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "At least let us make copies." "Not allowed," the man said flatly. As they began removing the hard drives and documents, Sophie glanced at Gabriel, panic rising in her chest. The proof they'd found, the Monaco connection, was gone. After the men left, the apartment felt hollow. Gabriel leaned against the wall, running a hand through his hair. "It's over." "No," Sophie said firmly. "We still have time." "Sophie, they took everything." She looked at him, her eyes fierce. Not everything. I memorized the account numbers. He blinked. You what? Every digit, she said. If I can access the bank's archives, we can still get the records. Gabriel stared at her, speechless. You'd risk that? For you? She said softly. Yes. He took a step closer, his voice low. You shouldn't have to save me twice. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Then stop giving me reasons to. They both laughed quietly, a brief flicker of light in the darkness surrounding them. As midnight passed, Sophie sat at his desk again, drawing a plan. Tomorrow, she said, you'll go to the tribunal. Let me handle Monaco. He frowned. Sophie, this isn't your fight. It became mine the moment you stopped being just the billionaire and started being the man I love. The words slipped out before she realized it. Silence filled the room. Gabriel's breath caught, his heart racing as her eyes widened. I didn't mean, she started. He stepped forward, gently lifting her chin until their eyes met. Say it again. Her voice trembled. The man I love. He smiled faintly, his thumb brushing her cheek. Then let me fight with you. They stood there, suspended between fear and hope, as the city lights shimmered around them. Two souls from different worlds, now bound by something far greater than circumstance. Outside, thunder rolled across the skyline. Neither of them knew that by dawn, their love would be tested in ways that neither money nor courage alone could survive. The storm arrived sooner than anyone expected. It started as a whisper, a rumor spreading through financial circles that Darmon Holdings had falsified a major report years earlier. Within days, it became a headline. Within hours, it was an investigation. And at the center of it, all stood Gabriel. Anonymous sources claimed that during his tenure as CEO, he had hidden financial losses to protect the company's image. The evidence looked convincing. Forged documents, manipulated figures, an email trail that pointed directly to his name. He knew immediately who was behind it. Isabel. She had been on the inside long enough to know how to wound him, not with money, but with reputation. And in the world he came from, reputation was everything. The morning the story broke, Sophie found him standing on his balcony, the city stretching below like a battlefield. He hadn't slept. They're calling for a criminal audit, he said flatly. They think I embezzled millions. She moved closer. Gabriel, you didn't. Of course I didn't. But Isabel's smart. She used old files, copied my digital signature. It'll take weeks to prove they're fake. Sophie reached for his arm. Then we'll fight it. He turned to her sharply. There's no we, Sophie. You've already lost too much because of me. She didn't flinch. You don't get to decide that for me. His voice softened, breaking under the weight of exhaustion. I can't drag you into this storm. It's uglier than you think. I've seen ugly, she said. I grew up with it. What I haven't seen is someone willing to fight for what's right, no matter how much it costs. Until now. He looked at her then, really looked, and something in his chest cracked. Why do you do this? He whispered. Why do you believe in me? Because you've already paid for your mistakes, she said, and because I've seen the man you really are. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength from her voice. Downstairs, the doorbell rang. When he opened it, a uniformed officer stood there holding an envelope. Mr. Darmon, this is a formal summons. You're required to appear before the ethics tribunal on Friday. Gabriel took it silently. When the door closed, Sophie stepped forward. We'll find proof, Gabriel. Something that clears you. He shook his head. Isabel covered her tracks too well. I'd need access to private archives, and they're locked behind board clearance. Sophie frowned. Then we find another way. He gave a tired smile. You sound like Leo. Maybe he's rubbing off on me. For the next 2 days, they barely slept. Sophie sat by his desk, sorting through hundreds of old documents, financial ledgers, and encrypted emails. Her analytical mind, the same one that helped her balance bills on a waitress's wage, now dissected billion-dollar reports with quiet precision. Look at this, she said one night, circling a name on a spreadsheet. This account, GM Holdings. It appears in every falsified transaction. Gabriel leaned closer. That's not one of ours. Exactly. Isabel must have created it as a ghost company. He stared at the document, realization dawning. She used my initials, GM, Gabriel Mathieu. She wanted it to look personal. Sophie smirked faintly. Then let's make it personal. They traced the fake company through offshore records, finding a pattern that led to a private bank in Monaco. Sophie's hands shook as she found the key, a payment authorization, under Isabel's name. Got you, she whispered. Gabriel looked at her with something between awe and disbelief. You just did what an entire audit team couldn't, she shrugged. Guess waitressing teaches you to notice details. He smiled, the first real one in days. You're extraordinary. But before they could celebrate, the lights flickered. A knock echoed through the apartment. 2 men in dark suits stood at the door. Mr. Darmont, one said, flashing a badge, we need to confiscate all relevant files for the ongoing investigation. Effective immediately. Sophie's heart stopped. You can't. We're in the middle of... It's procedure, ma'am. Gabriel's jaw tightened. At least let us make copies. Not allowed, the man said flatly. As they began removing the hard drives and documents, Sophie glanced at Gabriel, panic rising in her chest. The proof they'd found, the Monaco connection, was gone. After the men left, the apartment felt hollow. Gabriel leaned against the wall, running a hand through his hair. It's over. No, Sophie said firmly. We still have time. Sophie, they took everything. She looked at him, her eyes fierce. Not everything. I memorized the account numbers. He blinked. You what? Every digit, she said. If I can access the bank's archives, we can still get the records. Gabriel stared at her, speechless. You'd risk that? For you? She said softly. Yes. He took a step closer, his voice low. You shouldn't have to save me twice. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Then stop giving me reasons to. They both laughed quietly, a brief flicker of light in the darkness surrounding them. As midnight passed, Sophie sat at his desk again, drawing a plan. Tomorrow, she said, you'll go to the tribunal. Let me handle Monaco. He frowned. Sophie, this isn't your fight. It became mine the moment you stopped being just the billionaire and started being the man I love. The words slipped out before she realized it. Silence filled the room. Gabriel's breath caught, his heart racing as her eyes widened. I didn't mean... she started. He stepped forward, gently lifting her chin until their eyes met. Say it again. Her voice trembled. The man I love. He smiled faintly, his thumb brushing her cheek. Then let me fight with you. They stood there, suspended between fear and hope, as the city lights shimmered around them. 2 souls from different worlds, now bound by something far greater than circumstance. Outside, thunder rolled across the skyline. Neither of them knew that by dawn, their love would be tested in ways that neither money nor courage alone could survive. The morning of the tribunal arrived cloaked in grey. The marble courthouse loomed over the city like a monument to judgment. Reporters crowded the steps, shouting Gabriel's name as he stepped out of the car in a charcoal suit. No longer the untouchable billionaire, but a man walking toward the edge of everything he had built. Inside, the air buzzed with tension. The press had painted him as both villain and mystery, the fallen mogul who chose a waitress over wealth. Every seat in the tribunal chamber was filled. At the front, the panel of judges waited in silence, the sound of scribbling pens echoing like rainfall. But Sophie wasn't there. She was in Monaco. Hours earlier, she had taken a train before sunrise, clutching a folder of handwritten notes, the account numbers she had memorized, the final thread that could clear Gabriel's name. Her plan was simple, reckless, and borderline impossible. Reach the bank, convince them to release the digital logs, and get back before the verdict. The bank's glass tower gleamed under the Mediterranean sun. Inside, the manager, a severe man in a navy suit, eyed her suspiciously. I'm afraid access to private account records requires authorization, Miss Moreau, she said. And I have authorization. She slid a photo across the desk, a picture of Gabriel's accident torn from a newspaper. That man's life is being destroyed by a crime he didn't commit. You can help stop it. The manager's expression didn't change. We follow protocol, not sentiment. She took a deep breath. Then follow this one. Article 14 of the International Fraud Prevention Act. If I provide proof of falsified identification linked to your institution, you're legally obligated to cooperate. He hesitated. You're very informed for a waitress. I had to be, she said. Life doesn't give second chances to people like me. The man sighed. Wait here. Minutes crawled by. Every second felt like an hour. Then, finally, he returned, a thin flash drive in hand. These files were buried under a false encryption, he said quietly. If what you claim is true, they'll prove everything. Sophie nearly cried. Thank you. As she ran out of the building, her phone buzzed. Mrs. Darmont. They've started without him. Isabel is testifying. Her pulse spiked. Isabel. Of course she was there. Back in Paris, Gabriel sat in the witness chair, jaw tense, as Isabel's voice echoed through the chamber. He was obsessed, she said coldly. When I ended things, he spiraled. He forged reports to cover up his failures. I saw him do it. Gasps filled the room. The judges scribbled furiously. Gabriel's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. When it was his turn to speak, he stood tall, despite the weight crushing him. Yes, I made mistakes. I was arrogant. But fraud? No. I built this company to create, not deceive. Everything I've done, even the choices you disapprove of, came from a place of wanting to be better than the man I used to be. The lead judge leaned forward. And yet, the evidence suggests otherwise. Gabriel's chest tightened. Then let me ask you this, he said. If money is proof of worth, what do you make of the people who give everything without expecting a return? The room went silent. He continued, voice trembling with emotion. A woman I know saved my family, then saved me. She has nothing, no wealth, no power, but she taught me more about integrity in one act of kindness than I've learned in a lifetime of privilege. You want the truth? The truth is, people like her are why I'm still standing. The chamber stilled. Even Isabel faltered for a second, her composure cracking under the sincerity of his words. Just then, the doors burst open. Sophie, rain-soaked, breathless, clutching the flash drive like it was oxygen. I have proof, she called out. Evidence that clears Gabriel Darmont of every charge. All eyes turned to her. The guards tried to stop her, but the presiding judge raised a hand. Let her through. Sophie hurried forward, handing the flash drive to Gabriel's lawyer. Within moments, the courtroom lights dimmed as a screen flickered to life. Files, transactions, and emails scrolling rapidly. At the bottom of the final document, the sender's name glowed on the screen. Isabelle Laurent. The chamber erupted. Reporters shouted, cameras flashed, and Isabel's face turned white. The judge slammed his gavel. Order! Order in this court! Gabriel stared at the screen, disbelief giving way to something deeper, awe. Sophie stood across the room, her chest rising and falling as she tried to catch her breath. Their eyes met, and in that moment, surrounded by chaos, nothing else existed. The tribunal adjourned within the hour. The verdict was clear. All charges dropped. Isabel was taken into custody, her silence finally betraying her. Outside, the rain had stopped. Gabriel stepped through the courthouse doors into the cold air, his coat soaked from the downpour, but he didn't care. Sophie stood under the steps, arms wrapped around herself, hair damp and wind-tossed. He walked toward her slowly, the crowd parting around them like the world knew to give them space. You did it, he said quietly. She smiled faintly. We did it. He shook his head. No, you did. You saved me again. Sophie laughed softly. You're really starting to owe me a lot of coffees. He reached out, brushing a wet strand of hair from her face. Then I guess I'll spend the rest of my life paying you back. She froze at the tenderness in his voice. Gabriel. He leaned closer, his forehead resting gently against hers. You came back for me, when no one else would. I told you I don't break promises, she whispered. Their lips met, slow and trembling, as if the universe itself had been waiting for that moment. The noise of the city faded. There was only the sound of rain dripping from rooftops and the rhythm of two hearts finding each other again. When they finally pulled apart, Sophie smiled through her tears. What happens now? Gabriel looked out at the grey horizon, then back at her. Now, he said softly. Now, we start over, not as billionaire and waitress, but as equals. She nodded. That's all I ever wanted. But even as they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Gabriel's phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from an unknown number. You may have won this battle, Gabriel, but war leaves scars. Be careful what you love. It can always be taken from you. He stared at the screen, the faint tremor returning to his hand. Sophie touched his arm gently. What is it? He slipped the phone away. Nothing that can touch us now. But deep down he knew. Nothing in his world ever truly stayed buried. And somewhere behind bars, Isabel smiled in the dark. Months passed, and the world slowly forgot the scandal. Newspapers moved on. Investors returned, and Darmont Holdings rebuilt its image stronger than ever. Not through fear or manipulation, but through transparency and empathy. Gabriel had changed everything. He sold off a third of his company's luxury assets, redirecting profits to scholarships, small business programs, and community funds. The media called it the Darmont Reform, but those close to him knew it by another name, Sophie's Way. Sophie refused any credit. She still worked, though not as a waitress anymore. She ran a small foundation, teaching financial literacy to underprivileged families, funded quietly by Gabriel but led entirely by her heart. She said it made her feel free. Their lives had settled into something real, simple dinners instead of galas, laughter instead of power games. But love, like truth, was never effortless. One evening, months after the trial, Gabriel took Sophie back to the same cafe where they'd first met. The place had been renovated since then, brighter lights, new furniture, but to him it still smelled of coffee, rain, and second chances. Sophie sat across from him, still teasing him the way she used to. "You know, you look better when you're not trying to look rich." He smiled. "And you look dangerous when you're right. Then I must look dangerous all the time." He laughed, the kind of deep, genuine laugh that once seemed impossible for him. But then he grew quiet. "Do you ever think about how close we came to losing everything?" She nodded. "All the time. But then I remember that sometimes life has to fall apart before it can fall into place." He reached across the table, taking her hand gently. "I used to believe success was measured in numbers. Now I know it's measured in peace." Sophie smiled. "And how's your balance sheet on that?" He squeezed her hand. "Growing. Because of you." The warmth between them was unspoken but absolute. Around them, the cafe buzzed softly, unaware that two people were rewriting what love beyond money truly meant. Then, a voice broke through the calm. "Mr. Darmont?" They both turned. A young woman in a grey suit stood by their table, holding a manila envelope. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but this was delivered to the office. They said it's urgent." Gabriel frowned, accepting the envelope. His name was written across it in elegant handwriting. Familiar, too familiar. Sophie noticed his hesitation. "What is it?" He opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "You can't erase the past, only live long enough to face it." Below the line was a signature, Isabelle Laurent, and beneath that, a list of names, shell companies, hidden assets, offshore accounts. But they weren't his. They belonged to his late father. Sophie's brow furrowed. "What does this mean?" Gabriel stared at the page. "It means she wasn't lying about everything." He folded the paper slowly, slipping it back into the envelope. "This isn't a threat anymore. It's a truth I never wanted to see." Sophie leaned closer. "What are you going to do?" He looked at her, the woman who had pulled him from darkness again and again, and smiled faintly. "What you'd do? Face it." Days later, Gabriel announced a full audit of his family's historic holdings, exposing hidden corruption that had been buried for decades. He didn't hide behind lawyers or money. He stood before the public and told the truth. The world didn't expect it. Some called him foolish, others called him fearless, but Sophie called him free. When the press asked why he'd chosen to reveal secrets that could tarnish his legacy, he simply said, "Because love without honesty isn't love, and wealth without truth is poverty in disguise." After the conference, Sophie found him on the balcony of their apartment, staring out at the Paris skyline bathed in gold. "You did it again," she said softly. "You chose the harder path." He turned to her, smiling. "That's because I learned from someone who never took the easy one." She wrapped her arms around him, resting her head on his chest. "You know you've changed everything, Gabriel." He kissed the top of her hair. "No, Sophie, you did." They stood there in silence as the sun dipped below the rooftops, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. For the first time in either of their lives, there was no storm waiting on the horizon, just peace. Down in the street, the cafe lights flickered on. The world moved as it always did, indifferent to the love story unfolding above it. A story of two souls who found redemption, not through power or passion, but through courage and truth. Gabriel looked at Sophie, the wind catching her hair, her eyes glowing in the fading light. "You once said peace isn't found alone," he murmured. "You were right," Sophie smiled. "Then let's never lose it again." He nodded. "Never." They stayed like that, quiet, steady, eternal, as the city below hummed with life, unaware that in one small apartment above Paris, two broken hearts had finally learned how to beat in harmony. And for those who passed by and happened to glance up at the balcony, they might have seen what love beyond money truly looks like. Not perfect, not effortless, but real. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because some stories remind us that no fortune is greater than finding someone who heals your soul.